Hi, it's Lyle from Made by Marley, and today I am going to be doing a modern take on a vintage sort of feel using autumn inspired colours and the new Pretty in Plaid IOD stamp. So I've opened up the Pretty in Plaid stamp. Remember, when you buy any of the new stamps, that you have to season them first with a little bit of sandpaper. I'm so sorry for that noise. Basically, just rub it over with sandpaper just to give it more tooth when it sticks. Now, how are we going to do this? We're going to start with our big check first, and I'm going to use these colours, which I've mixed up a raspberry. I'm going to be using this sort of greeny blue and this sort of turquoisey lighty blue colour. I'm not sure if that's the technical term. And possibly some lighter pink later on down the road. So how are we going to do it? We're doing sort of a modern take on vintage inspired. I'm thinking what my sort of references were years ago when I was young. We used to get like boxes of shortbread. They're really vintage when you find them now, and they're lovely, sort of tartan coloured with the roses on them. So I'm thinking a more modern take on that, using sort of autumnal colours. So we need to get this one off because this is the one we're going to start with. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to set up ready to stamp the front. I forgot to tell you what we were actually doing. I've got a beautiful little set of vintage drawers. Nice sort of detail around the bottom. Most of our design work is going to be in the front, on the sides. So to make this probably just the easiest way that I think that I want to kind of deal with this is I am going to be quite cheeky and just cut. I'm just going to cut out my squares. It's going to save us a lot of hassle, and it's going to give me something to grip onto. So I'm just going to do this, and I'm going to do this up this side here. If you're finding it hard to cut them out, kind of bend your plastic. And I'm going to be using all of the three. I might use the bow at the end. I'm not entirely sure where we're kind of going with this. So cut out the three, and the first one I'm going to be using of the set is this one. Gosh, it's sticking to everything. And as I explained, then you kind of do the opposite way. Don't go crazy on them, it's just to give it a... Now I've got my mini rollers here, which are probably going to be the best thing for the job. And I've got a plastic sheet on the floor, and I'm just going to put a little bit of my paint onto this, get my stamp ready, make sure I've got plenty of paint on my mini roller, but I'm not going too crazy. Can you fast forward this bit? Okay, so how I'm going to do it, I'm going to start up in this corner because I'm going to go right across my drawers, and that should hopefully keep us quite straight. Now I've got kind of in and outy bits where the drawers go, so I'm just kind of trying to get this part. Now I'm going for a vintage look, so I'm not too worried if it's not all perfect. I think the overall finish should be fine. So there we go. Just gonna have a little peek. That's our first lot of checks. Now I'm gonna go, I'll do the next, I'll do maybe three, and then we'll I'm just going to do the whole front. I mean, it just saves you having to watch it over and over and over and over again. So I'm just loading up my stamp again with my mini roller, which the mini rollers are just perfect for this as well. They're just the right size. Grabbing my stamp, taking it to where I was before. And now as I said, it's not printing out, you know, these parts here where my drawers are. But as I said, it's a vintage look I'm going for. I'm not, oh, I did a little bit of shifting there. Too busy talking, not enough concentration. Make sure you touch all your parts of your stamp. Try and hold it straight with the other hand. And you've seen me do stamping so many times, you're probably bored already. Now, that's that one on. And one more, and then we'll call it quits. And I'll just do the whole of the front. When you're stamping, take your time, make sure you get paint on all your areas. That's what's going to give you the best stamp. Up to this one again. And like that. I think I've just touched the top with pink fingers, so I'm going to have to fix that at some point in time. Martin is laughing already. Yeah. I think we're good for there. Whoop, I did a bit of shifting again. So there we go. So I'm going to do the whole of the front of this. So when you get to this end, you're just like basically lining this up again. Then you've got your blank, your negative spaces. So you're just lining it up and lining it up. And you just, that's all you're doing until you've done the whole section. I like this part here where it's a little bit darker. But I'm liking all these, see these pieces where it hasn't stamped, because this is going to add to that sort of vintage look that I'm trying to achieve. Okay, so we've got our base, the raspberry on top of the mustard, and now we're going to do the teal green on top of this. Now, my positioning, I think you just have to play around with this, but I'm going to start with this part off the edge so that my stripes go through my negative, my back to my mustard. Because if I move it this way, it's going to be a little bit off kilter, and you could probably, or maybe I want it in the center. Really, I think it's actually up to you. It's your own personal choice. I've actually just changed my mind on camera. I'm going to have these little squares in the centers of my negative spaces, and I'll work what I'm going to do out with that in a minute. So I'll just load it up and I'll show you, like I did the last time, a couple of times of me just doing it. I quite like the way this is working because it does, I was kind of worried about how to get it kind of looking sort of vintage, but I think the stamp's pretty much done it itself, where it's printed and where it hasn't printed. Now, so I decided that I want these, how did I just have it a minute ago? I want this to be in my, that's not the way I had it though, hang on. Bear with me. It's just going to take a little bit of time so that you know exactly what you're doing. I think this was how I had it before. So I'm just going to commit to this. I'm going to try my best to not let this one move or slip. I could have laid it down flat, but the only problem with that for me is I like to be able to see it in context, and I sometimes think you can't actually do that when a piece is lying flat. So I like it to be that it's in front of me so I can look back and take a wee step back from it. So that's why it's not down on the bottom of the ground. Sometimes I do it, but all right, let's have a look and see how this has worked out for us. So I'm going to go along doing exactly the same thing again, lining up my stripes. I'm actually really pleased with this color combo, because what we're going to do at the end with the last one is make sure that these stripes go through this space here. But I really think with this one, it's just play around until you're incredibly happy with it. So I'm just going to go along. You've seen me do one. I'm just going to fill it out all the way along. What I did at the bottom of this was I just kept it going. I know there's detail down here, but it kind of gives it, it makes it that it's just not an abrupt stop, and we are going for that sort of vintagey look, so I just let some of it stamp and some of it not. I'm going to be doing the same pattern on the sides, but a top tip of what I do if I've got paint, in particular self-leveling paint, I squish it with water like this and then sit it to the side so that the paint doesn't dry up and it's not going to stick and ruin your stamps. So I'm just going to set this to the side. Now the next one we're going to do is going to be this one, and I'm just going to set up for it because I've got a bit of a paint dribblage thing going on here. So I'm going to set up and we'll work out where this one's going to go in this pattern. I think it's probably, I want the check to go. I'll work it out off camera. So this is me just loading up my very last. Now you can use this stamp and you can just use one on a piece of furniture. One of the stamps, depending on how thick you want your checks. I wanted all of mine because obviously I know it's plaid, but I was wanting mine to look like a sort of Harris tweed tartan, so that's why I've used all of them. Now I worked this out a minute ago. I want to have this square in the center of my pink, so I'm going to have to start here this time with my light green or sort of turquoisey colour. And this is going to be quite interesting because I've started in a place where the drawers go up and down, but I think the trick is not to shift. And I've just shifted about a million times there. So I'm going to move on to my next square. I'll just show you this one. I'm conscious that I want you to see it, but I don't want you to be too bored seeing the same thing repeated over and over again. So I'm kind of conscious of both. And I'm wanting it in the center of my pink. So I'm going to do the same thing again. You get some beautiful tartans that are made from tweed from Harris, and they do like a very, very expensive range of like scarves and coats and jackets that all look very similar to this. They do some mossy green ones with an ochre. You could Google some of those, the Harris tweeds. They really are, they're beautiful. So this was what I'd kind of thought of. I'm going to take a center of this out in the middle and put flowers in it, but this is our base. So I'm going to go on and do this one now. So I've used the plaid stamp on the sides and the front. Now, so this is a sort of modern take on the sort of kind of vintagey checked boxes. The colours would have been completely different, but we've got this far. Now what I've done is I've just got a piece of cardboard. It's just off the back of a transfer, and I've made an oval because I wanted to see what sort of size. So I made a little boo-boo here, but I was laughing to myself because I thought, well, this is going on here anyway, so this is where this is going to go now. But I want to make it more like a stencil, so I've got my oval and I'm putting it on the other part actually of this. I'm going to have to make it slightly smaller because it's not going to fit on my cardboard. And the thing I'm going to do next is, I've got a pen here, I'm just going to, now you're going to lean on something at least. I mean, normally I wouldn't even bother drawing around it. I would just cut it out with my template like that, like which I'm about to do. So you're just making yourself one big, because I don't want it a solid block of colour behind here. I want it more, or do I? Oh, I don't know. No, I do want it solid actually. I'm talking rubbish. So voila, just the same thing, but like this, and we can tape this on to here like so. So I will get tape in a minute. So first of all, make yourself a template, and I'm just going to go and get the tape, and we'll tape this onto the center. So I'm going to stick this on. I'm just laughing because I asked Martin to go and get the tape off the shelves, and he had to tiptoe through loads of cans of paint again. And you know what happened the last time? Although he denies he did it, but he did. So I think this is, I can never tell. I've got, you know, for being an artist, you would think that I would have a better eye for being straight, but my eye is notoriously off, isn't it, Martin? You saying it is. Oh, got a bit giddy there with the tape. So just lightly tape it on because you don't want it to take, the finish is still quite damp, and off your finish will come. So this is what we got to play with. Now this is where it gets kind of exciting. So I'm wanting sort of feathered, some more sort of stencil effect here, but I want a more of a solid colour here. And once I've got my solid colour one coat down, I am going to be applying in the centre some inlays. And I think I was thinking of this one, and I think I might have some birds on this one, which will coordinate with the blue colour we've got on here. So I think this might work with some of this and some of this. So the colour I'm going to be using is the dusty sort of pinky colour, and I'm probably going to just use what I was using for doing some of the stenciling to get, and I've got a nice big, offload it because you don't want it too heavy around the edges. You're probably going to have to give it a couple of coats. I've got my furniture on wheels, which are of absolutely no use to me because the stable floor is so uneven, they just keep falling off them. And every so often I have to go and just do the sides without the wheels anyway. I think it might be different for me with, I've been envious of them. Other furniture artists have them and I've wanted them. So I've got them, but now they're they're not good in the stable, not at the moment anyway. So I'm thinking we're just kind of, be careful if your stencil is as neat as mine, because you don't want it, I might take it off and kind of do some blending outwards, but we'll see. And in the middle, obviously, I'm going to be doing one solid coat. Now, you know what I do inlays, you need one coat and then you come back and you put another coat on top. So that's what we'll be doing here. Just kind of feather that out. Just don't want it too heavy around the edges. So I'm going to go away and I'm going to let this dry until we can put the next part on. I think I'm going to leave, because I think they'll just fade away with the second coat, but if they don't, I quite like them. Maybe I could go over the top of the inlays. Oh, there's an idea. Right, we'll see what we'll get to that when we get to that. Right, there we go. We're going to let that dry. Okay, I decided not to do 2 coats on this. I decided to apply my inlays with lacquer, just so that I could still have this sort of kind of almost distressed sort of plaid underneath. So now what I'm trying to achieve is I'm trying to put these on in a sort of circular, now who knows if I'll achieve this, but I'm hoping it'll be sort of circular, but just to make sure, I'm going to just make sure that I've got plenty of lacquer on here. And I think I'm going to do something like this. Right, it's going to take a little bit jiggly pokery. I maybe don't want that one there. And then I'll spray all these at the end. So I think maybe I'll put this one here. And then sort of this one here. Just make sure I've got enough. Now you're going to have to make sure you, once you've done this and it's dry, that you open your drawers as soon as possible, because this is going to be kind of one of those ones where your drawers might not open if you don't. Yeah. All I did was just cut them all up into patterns so that I could make this. I'll cut this off here. Anything you don't use, you can always use again. I don't need that little rose there, so I'm just going to cut it off because I might want to put it somewhere else. And then now it's just a matter of sort of tidying everything up. So I want one here, and I need something here. So you get the drift. I mean, I'm just, in a minute, I'm gonna just do what you'd normally do with inlays and just put the water over the top of them, but I feel like you're kind of, and I think maybe something down here, maybe some greenery. And maybe some more greenery up here just to fill this. It's just a matter of kind of working it out. I'm sure I'm kind of rushing this, but you know, you might want to take your actual time. So say that was my positioning for that. I think I'm going to probably tinker about with it a little bit more off camera. I think I might put, yeah, I want to put something in the middle, and I thought that I would put, now the orange is a bit off, but these two birds here, I might have to cut them and move them in a bit, but these two birds here might work. So let's see what I can do with these. One can definitely go in here, so let's just cut this off. I'll worry about the branch in a minute. Just want to make sure there was plenty of lacquer on that because it was getting a little bit dry. And there. And I'll see if I can move this other one into this space here. If I cut off as much as I possibly can, I'll lose a bit of his tail, but that's okay. We'll just pretend it's behind the flowers. A bit more lacquer. And I'm going to put this here. And I want just a little hint of something here. So we'll just take this part here that was on the branch. I'm going to have to try and make up that branch actually to make it go across. So I think I'll do this instead and place it between those two branches. Now there's going to be some bits under there that isn't quite, you know, with the other pieces of paper. I'm not too worried about that because I can paint them in if I'm struggling. Give it a good scoosh. Bed it down in. Normally I just wet a cloth, but I happen to have my scoosher here, so. There, now let's see how that all comes out. I need to let that dry. Now, while this is drying, you don't need to see these parts. I'm going to paint this rim, probably the dark bluey green, and I'm going to paint the feet. So I'll get on and do that while this is all drying. So I'm just going to take these off now, just another wee scoosh and then a wee pick, and we should be. I always find when I do these in the stable, over the winter when I was doing them in the house, they came out perfect, but in the stable it can always be a little bit hit or miss. Now remember, you can use these again. Actually, no, you can't. They've got lacquer on them. You can't use them again. So I'm going to paint in between these vintagey flowers. That bit there was a bit rubbish. Not the best, but I have to try and bring, because these colours are a little bit off from my other colours, I have to try and bring my own colours into this now. So I'm going to do that. This is actually okay. I'm quite liking that. Let's see. All right, like what we're going to work with now. It definitely looks vintage and it looks like it's aged, so I don't want to have too many new things on it. So I've got this. So I'm just going to do something like, I need a bit more paint on my brush. I'm just going to do, these are my base for my blue flowers, which is going to link up here, and we'll put some green around them. And we'll put the rest of the colour in. I just need to put these ones in first. So this is the base cut. There's going to be other colours over the top of the ears that would match this. Put a nice big one in there. And one here. Yeah. So you can see what I'm doing, just building it up. I'll dry these with a heat gun and put the rest of the colours in, but I think that's probably, I don't want it looking too contrived. Now, while we've got the blues out, we can add some, oh, this is terribly messy down the side of my paint can. I'm not even going to clean my brush. I'm just going to go into here, and we want some little leaves just to, this is the great thing about IOD things. You can add, take away, add more, add all your own bits of art round about it, and it all just kind of comes together. Now we need to go back in with a little bit of our mustard. Clean my brush off. And I'm just going to do some there. I don't want mine to look too neat because the rest, the inlays come off quite, you know, rustic looking, vintagey. So quite happy with that. All I'm doing now is I'm just kind of distressing around the edges and taking away some of our plaid, only because from a distance it needs to kind of stand out a little bit more, and kind of at the moment it just kind of settles into it. So I'm just picking out areas and just kind of knocking it back, just distressing it back with the same colour that I started with. Now I've done that. Just going to wait for this to dry to do our next stage. So I've painted a bow in here and I've made it kind of vintagey looking, and over the top of it I am going to, I've just put ink on this. I'm just putting the bow from the stamp set on here. Now my paint was quite chunky because I mixed lots of different colours together to get that sort of vintagey looky. So I'm hoping that it all stamps out and it hasn't shifted because my hands are a little bit dirty, shall we say. Right, let's have a look and see what's happened now. So I think this part here, I think I had to kind of guess with my bow, so that's my bow. Now, next thing, I just want this to dry for a couple of minutes. Next thing, we're going to use the original template, which was obviously just slightly, ever so slightly bigger than this. And I'm going to put this over here, and I'm going to try my absolute hardest to do a sort of kind of rustic frame. I might have to stop the camera and take it off these wheels because it's wheeling about everywhere and I don't want this to move. Okay, I've got my template ready and should have maybe taped this on. Just want a line all the way around this. I'm going to make it nice. Don't panic. See, I don't want to go through my bowl. And I'll start at this edge. Doesn't matter if it's not quite perfect. I seem to say that a lot. I've got it caught in my sleeve, can you believe that? The sleeves of this shirt are so big and bouncy that they're absolutely covered in paint. Now, hopefully that's just enough to get me started. Right, now, you know those kind of vintagey frames they have, where they do the little circles? I am going to do this all the way around, and then I'm going to paint each middle turquoise. So I'm going to go on, because you don't want to be seeing me do this. And I'm going to try not to make them get bigger as I go. They'll end up giant at the bottom. I'm going to go all the way around this like this. I'll just get as far as the bow and then I'll show what I'm going to do. Actually, I quite like it white. I might, hang on a minute, I just need to test out what it looks like white. Actually, I might do it white with a little turquoise dot in the middle instead. I'm quite liking the white from afar. So I'm going to go on and do the frame first, and then I'll decide obviously what I'm doing next. I did my little frame and I put my little turquoisey dots in between, just kind of randomly. There's some big, some small. Then what I did was I got the end of my paintbrush and I did some little kind of like almost like sort of little kind of like kind of accents just to pull this part together like that. That's all I did. I put some white highlights around the bow. And the next thing that's going to happen is, look at this hardware. Aren't these nice? So these are going to be the hardware. They're not going to be too obtrusive for the piece. They're going to go on next. It's self-sealing paint. Now, because we've used lacquer, there's that sort of lacquery colour there. And we're going to wait till this dries. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some brown wax. And hopefully it'll catch on top of the lacquer and leave that a little bit dirtier than everywhere else. We'll see if that is actually the case. So I'll go away and put the hardware on. So I've got my handles on. How super cute are they? But I realised that I haven't sealed on top of the live inlays. So I've got some lacquer here. Now you just have to go kind of gently across them, just making sure that you don't smear them. So nothing too rough. You're gonna have to open your drawers again, make sure that so that's all I'm going to do there, and then we'll put some dark wax on. Oops, that kind of smeared that turquoisey. Oh, I don't mind that. Okay, that's that part done. Okay, so I've got a little bit of dark wax on my finger, and I mean, I'm not going crazy here. I'm just trying to kind of like sort out some of the, you know, like where just where the lacquer was originally put on for the Quite like that smear. I think that kind of works. Kind of giving it a little bit of depth, really, going in and out everything, and just kind of like, that's all I'm doing. I think after this we are finished. So I'll just get on and I'll do this and we'll be done. So we're finished. What did we do today? Painted it a base colour, did the Pretty and Plaid stamp. In Scotland you would say top, totty and tartan, but Pretty and Plaid is what it's called. We did some inlays, we did some making our own stencils, which I always think are valuable, but especially if you've got a template, because you can then use that as your cover for things. That's really what we did today, and nothing too hard, nothing too confusing. I've been Lel from Me by Marley. If you've already subscribed, thank you very much. And if you've watched this and you like what I do, please consider subscribing. There's lots of furniture reimagining and furniture art on our channel. Give it a thumbs up, give us a like, give us a share, press the bell so that you're notified when we release a new video. I'm actually getting better at this, haven't I? So I'll see you again next time. Thanks, bye.